In this video, I'd like to review some common experimental and creative forms that you'll often encounter in creative nonfiction. I expect that you will have encountered and heard of most of the concepts in this video from your E311C course, your intermediate creative nonfiction course, but I'd still like to quickly review these concepts just to make sure that we're on the same page and using the same terminology. Now, why might you want to use a formal constraint like writing a collage essay or a hermit crab essay, for instance? First of all, when done well, these formal constraints can create forward momentum and keep the reader engaged. In addition, I often find that they help me as a writer think in new ways and make connections I wouldn't otherwise have made. And I find this is true for many other creative nonfiction writers I know as well. A term you'll hear me use in this video, in this unit, and probably later in the course as well is the term crot. A crot's just another word for a section. This term comes from the editing world, and it simply means the text between two white space breaks in an essay. But you can just as easily call this a section. The first form I'd like to talk about is what's called a braided essay. Braided means that there are three, sometimes two to three strands, so-called braided or woven together. And these sections, or crots, alternate between two or three focuses. For instance, you might be alternating between two or three different scenes. You might be alternating between a scene and reflection, or a couple of scenes and reflection. Maybe you'd alternate between scene and some formal research. There are lots of different options for what you might include in a braided essay. Hermit crab essays are essays that take the form of another genre. The name, of course, comes from the hermit crab. Hermit crabs seek out the shells of other species and live in those other shells, so they sort of take on a different shape, a different form. That's where the name hermit crab essay comes from. These can come in all kinds of different forms, and this is just a quick list of examples, although it's not by any means comprehensive. You might see something like a recipe, an instruction manual, an advice column, a resume. Eulabis's essay that we're going to be reading for this week is called the pain scale, and it takes the form of a pain scale. If you're not familiar with that, you'll see what that looks like when you read the essay. And you may encounter other forms that don't quite fit the definition of a braided essay or a hermit crab essay or a collage essay, but still experiment with form in interesting ways. And I think you'll find that a lot of the same sorts of concepts and techniques that are used in braided, collage, and hermit crab essays can be used in other experimental forms as well. Now, it's easy to look at an experimental essay, especially something like a collage essay, and think, oh, that's easy. The essayist just put sort of whatever he or she found interesting and relevant on the page and called it an essay. But it's really not that simple. These essays are often harder to write than they look. One thing that makes them true essays, and not just sort of random thoughts collected on a page, is that all essays, even those which experiment with form, still need to have thematic development, forward drive, or something that keeps the reader interested throughout the essay. What often gives the essay this forward drive or this thematic development is the placement of ideas and information. Crots are placed side by side in such a way that creates interesting comparisons and or juxtapositions. And finally, you'll often hear that the form should match the content. For instance, let's say that you were writing an essay in the form of a resume. That would make a lot of sense if you were writing an essay about your personal development. However, that wouldn't make a lot of sense if you were writing an essay about whale watching. That said, Even though these essays can be tricky to write and to write well, understand that I'm not expecting perfection on the assignment for this week. What I'm expecting is for you to have fun, to try something new, and to get a sense of what it's like to write an essay with an interesting or unusual form. I'm looking forward to reading what you write.